Clock has passed 1 o'clock, so I'm gonna start this PhD defense. I'm Stig Eving Olsen. I'm associate professor at DTU Management Engineering, and I'm the procedural chair of this defense. So first of all, I'd like to welcome, of course, the main person in this defense, Andrea Corona, who will present his PhD thesis, Environmental Sustainability Assessment of Bioproducts based on agricultural crops and crop residue feedstocks. He has been supervised by Morten Birkel, associate professor, and Professor Michael Hauschild from here, DTU Management Engineering. And we have an examination committee, Associate Professor Ulf Sonesson from Research Institute Sweden, Sander Brun, Associate Professor at University of Copenhagen, and Niki Bay, Associate Professor here at DTU Management Engineering. This defense will start with a presentation by Andrea, about 45 minutes. If you go much more than that, I will stop you. And then we will have a short break, 10 minutes break, approximately, where those who are not interested in all the interesting questions that the examination committee will ask can leave. And after that, we will start the discussion session, where these three guys will ask questions. And if anyone from the audience here want to ask a question to Andrea, you can approach me in the break and give me a notice of that. Then you will also be allowed to ask questions in the end. The whole thing will take maximum 3 hours, so we'll stop the latest 4 o'clock. And with this, I'll give the word to Andrea.
Thank you, Stig. So today we're going to talk about the outcome of my PhD project that has been carried out in the last 3 years at the Division for Quantitative Sustainability Assessment. So for that, I want to first of all thank my supervisor, Michael and Morten, for the chance given to work on this project, and also at the assessment committee to dedicate some time in January to read through my thesis. So my PhD is titled Environmental Sustainability Assessment of Bioproduct based on agricultural crop and crop residue feedstock, and has been financed by the BioValue project, which is a Danish project looking at knowledge and innovation for sustainable refining of biomass. The project has been running for 5 years and involves different universities and some companies as well. The focus of BioValue is to develop new technology to upgrade all the components from the biomass, so not only on focusing on glucose, but to exploit all the potential feedstock available in the biomass to produce a value-added product. The BioValue is organized in 6 main sub-projects, which cover all the conversion value chain, from the biomass production to the separation and the production of the bio-based product. And I was part of the Socio-Economic and Sustainability and Ethics group. The CESE group has been divided in 2 parts: the economical assessment carried out by Copenhagen University, while the environmental assessment has been divided in 2 parts, where the agricultural LCA, so the environmental assessment of the biomass, is carried out by Aarhus University, and we were in charge of the environmental assessment of the industrial part, so the separation and the conversion. During the last 3 years, 9 scientific publications has been done, more or less almost all published or submitted, and also 2 book chapters. In the thesis and in the following presentation, I just include 5 of them, and they will be marked with Roman numerals throughout the thesis. So today the presentation is composed by a first part where I introduce a little bit what is a biorefinery concept. And the second, we will look at the research objective and research question of my PhD. And then we will take a look at the results, where we analyze 3 different case studies. And then we will wrap it up with a conclusion and further work. So let's start. So with our interest to reduce our dependencies from fossil fuel, we soon realized that we need more renewable sources. While for fossil-based energy, it can be easily substituted by different type of renewable energies, such as wind, solar, biomass, or hydro, fossil-based material production can only be substituted by the biomass. At the beginning, the initial focus was on the utilization of food crops, so the first generation feedstock. And the technology were focusing on the utilization of glucose, such as, for example, the one available in corn or sugarcane or on sugar beet. And the technology has been demonstrated pretty simple and economically feasible, because we kind of know from thousands of years how to deal with sugar upgrade. However, this soon raised environmental and socio-political concern, mainly to the competition for land between food and fuel crops, or the other indirect land use changes, or other environmental concerns, such as water or biodiversity losses. So, from the first generation, the focus moved to what is called second generation feedstock, which are a lignocellulosic crop or crop residue feedstock. And however, moving from the first generation to the second generation is a big leap for two main reasons. The first one is where the glucose is inside the biomass. So to make the glucose available for further process, we need to pre-treat the biomass to be able to open up the structure and make the cellulose available for the enzyme to be treated and to extract and to hydrolyze to glucose. And the second point, it's also the glucose content in the biomass. So moving from first generation, where the glucose is mainly contained in the starch, where it can go up, for example, in corn, as you can see on the left side, we can go up on up to 80% of the total dry matter. When we move to lignocellulosic feedstock, the glucose content is much lower. It barely reaches 40% of the dry matter. So this, if we keep using technology that focus on glucose, we will result with a low effective yield, so we can convert up to 40% of the biomass to the product. And also, to refine and to extract the glucose, we will need much more energy and much more enzyme compared to the first generation. So from this basis, we need to develop new technologies to move away from this glucocentric approach and to focus on utilize all the biomass component. From this basis, the concept of biorefinery started. In 2010, the International Energy Agency defined the biorefinery as the sustainable processing of biomass into a spectrum of marketable product and energy. Biorefinery can be as three main principles. First of all, as defined, is the utilization of all the feedstock available. So not only focusing on the upgrade of the cellulose, but look also at the upgrade of the other biochemical component available. The second is to exploit the molecular complexity, and this is kind of different compared to traditional oil refinery, where the crude oil is a combination of different hydrocarbons. In this case, we have several different type of molecular compounds, which are very interesting to exploit their molecular complexity for the production of higher value product, which is also the third principle of biorefinery. So the focus on maximizing the production of higher value product and minimizing the low value, such as energy and heat. The biorefinery can also be composed by three main items. So first of all, we have a feedstock. We have a feedstock which enters the biorefinery, and through one or several separation process, we reach to produce the platform or intermediate products. Those can be defined as the simple biochemical components, such as glucose or lignin, or other compound downstream the conversion pathway. And then from the platform, through other upgrade process, we reach the final product out from the biorefinery. So this creates a complex system where, with a network-like structure, and every process is depending from the previous one, and so it's, we can have a different permutational configuration on that, and all of them are interdependent. And so the objective of my PhD project and this research is to try to use LCA to analyze this rather complicated system to assess the biorefinery environmental performance. Our goal is also to apply LCA at an early stage of the biorefinery design to support the technology developer. So my focus during this PhD has been on the conversion stage, to look at and to assess different conversion pathways, different cascade utilization of the platform product, or to provide focus point optimization partner to the technology developers. The research question that has been developed for this PhD are three. First of all is what is the value and which type of information can be drawn from an LCA performed at an early stage. The second is is it possible to determine the optimal configuration in terms of technical and environmental performance? And the third is what is the best LCA approach to take in account to assess the environmental performance of bio-based material. If we look at the study published on LCA and biorefinery or in bio-based material production, we can identify that a lot of work has been done for biofuels, but not much for bio-based products. Most of the technology, as I said before, focus on glucose utilization. So they take lignocellulose, different type of feedstock, different type of process, but most of them focus on producing this glucose, and from the glucose throughout different other processes, they produce the bio-based material. So rather than a biorefinery concept, those can be grouped more as a biomass conversion. And the third point, coming out from the literature review, is that there's a limited focus on the biorefinery in itself. Some of the study look at only one conversion pathway. They don't assess different processes within the conversion pathways, or they present the biorefinery in an aggregated way, so as a black box. So having limited LCA data available and knowing that the performance of the biorefinery depends a lot on the biorefinery configuration, and since our focus is to provide decision support to the technology developer, we had to focus on the inventory stage in order to develop coherent and harmonized scenarios for all the biorefinery configuration we want to assess. Okay, so for the inventory in LCA, we generally need as the classic like a material and resource consumption for this process, the emissions, the energy consumption, but also in the case of biorefinery, it's interesting to look also at the products and the stream within the biorefinery, the yield and also the quality of it, because they will be highly relevant to understand how much and which type of conventional product we are replacing. To collect all this data, there are 4 different data sources available, which are generally used in LCA, which is the first is data collected in real facilities, but in this case, we don't have real facilities yet. The second is regarding literature data, and as I presented before, they provide some data, but they are not covering all the investigated scenarios. They don't look in very much detail on the conversion pathway itself. The life cycle database are a third option, but they provide few data, even less than what is published in the literature, and sometimes they are very highly aggregated, so it's very hard to modify them. So we can rely only on the last point, which is process simulation. So for process simulation, in the context of LCA, they are mainly used to perform the techno-economical assessment. As you can see on the scheme on the right, we can see the techno-economical assessment of bioethanol production done by Humbert in 2011. Through process simulation, they were capable to estimate the operating and the capital expenses for the biorefinery plant, to perform the upscaling, and also to understand from that, to understand the plant sizing and the equipment needed for the biorefinery. Process simulation generally are done on commercial software that are coming from the oil and gas mainly and the chemical industry, but also can be done also in more simplified manner on a classic spreadsheet. In the figure here, you can see a screenshot from one of the most used process simulation software for the chemical industry, which is Aspen, and it looks like a little bit like Gabi. You have your process, you drag and drop, you connect the flows, and then you define the parameters, and then you let the software calculate the equilibrium where you can estimate the energy consumption and the different stream moving inside the biorefinery. Within the context of LCA, the combination of process simulation and LCA has been proposed in other technological domains, such as the chemical industry, for energy conversion, in the nanotechnology, or also for biomass conversion. In this PhD, we applied a two-step framework to combine process simulation and LCA. So we developed the process simulation based on the lab and pilot plant data combined with the thermodynamic constant database. And the information that we can extract from the process simulation are mainly the biorefinery input-output in terms of material and energy, and also the biorefinery product in terms of yield and quality. And those are our input for the LCA software. So we try to apply this framework in three main cases. The cases were developed in order to cover all the biovalue activities, as shown in the figure below. And the second point is to answer the research question that my PhD has. And the third is also to look at non-glucose-centric technology to provide life cycle inventory to be used for further LCA studies. Yeah, I'm going to go through pretty fast on the three case study to explain you a little bit. So in the first case study, we are going to look at the upgrade of protein, which is the main platform of the Green Bio Refinery. And this work has been carried out in collaboration with Aarhus University. And this case aimed to answer the research question number 1 and 2. And the outcome has been published in paper 1 and 2. In the second one, we move to more classic yellow lignocellulosic biorefinery. And in this case, we look at technology for the lignin upgrade. This work has been done in collaboration with the National Renewable Energy Lab. And the case aimed to answer research question number 2. And the paper is number 3. And the third case, here, instead of we look at alternative use of cellulose, as you said before, one of the principles of biorefinery is to keep the molecular complexity. So in this case, we will investigate the potential production of fibers. Instead of taking the cellulose and breaking it down to glucose, we keep it together and we produce fibers to produce a higher value product. In this case, the work has been done in collaboration with the RISO-DTU, the Wind Energy Department, and it attempt to answer research question number 3. So let's start looking at the cases. So case number 1 is the Green Bio Refinery. It's utilization of fresh biomass for production of feed, fibers, fuel and fibers. The technology focuses on the utilization of fresh biomass for the extraction of protein. The technology has been developed around 1942, basically because at that time there was a shortage in Europe. You know, there was a war and there was a shortage of protein. So scientists were looking on alternative protein sources for human. This technology has been taken up in the recent years, and instead of the focus is not humans anymore, but is mainly to reduce our dependency from the import of protein, mainly from South America and soy generally, and also to produce more local protein sources. The biorefinery in itself is composed by 3 main processes. We take the fresh biomass, we fractionate it, and from there we produce the 2 main platforms, the press pulp and the press juice. And the press pulp goes through 2 other main processes, which is the precipitation, where the protein coagulates, and then a second step where they are separated from the deproteinized juice. The concept of Green Bio Refinery has been studied in several EU countries and in several EU projects. And different process configuration has been shown, as you see in the table. For example, different product from the press pulp has been suggested, or from the press juice, or from the residuals. But there are limited studies, LCA studies, and also there is no knowledge about to investigate which is the best configuration possible. So the objective of this case is to investigate the effect of the different biorefinery components, so the feedstock, the processes, and the products on the environmental performance of the biorefinery. And the second is to provide hotspot and criticalities in the conversion pathway for the technology developers. So to do so, I developed a process simulation, and the process simulation is based on the lab and the pilot plant test done at the Aarhus University in Falun. The process simulation contains 128 parameterized scenarios, and in these scenarios we assess different type of feedstock, alternative process for the three main processes, fractionation, precipitation, and separation, and also 4 different type of utilization of the press pulp. Those are the system boundaries of the process simulation and the LCA, and you can see how the 2 papers investigated different aspects of this. Paper number 1 looked mainly at the effect of the feedstock, and we play a little bit with the parameter on the process simulation, and we look also on alternative energy sources. While in paper 2, we take a closer detail on the biorefinery, and we assess different processes, for example here, and different products. So our process simulation calculates, given the input of the feedstock, the chemical composition of the feedstock, calculate the process input and output for each processes downstream on the conversion pathway, and also the quality and the yield of all the stream within the biorefinery. And those are used as input for the LCA model. Here you can see some results that you can carry out from a process simulation, so it's mainly the technical assessment of it. So for example, on the left side, you can see a Sankey diagram showing how the biochemical components gets divided through the 3 main output products. Or on the right side, for example, you can estimate the energy consumption of different scenarios, different model scenarios. Or on the bottom side, on the right, you can investigate where the protein, which is the main focus of this technology, gets distributed in the output product depending on the scenario used. So we carry out an LCA study with a functional unit of production and conversion of 1 ton of dry matter biomass. And for the feedstock, we use the LCA data calculated by the project partner. And as I said, the inventory is based on the process simulation and has been combined with Econvent 3. And we focus on 5 impact categories. And as a scenario sensitivity, we looked also at the effect of the parameter in the process simulation and the type of energy source that the biorefinery can utilize. So first of all, we are going to look at the effect of the feedstock of this biorefinery. In this case, as I said before, 4 types of crop has been tested. They have, unfortunately, a similar protein content, but they have different agricultural practices. And as you can see from the graph, you can see, first of all, that the environmental performance of the biorefinery is highly dependent of the feedstock use. And second point, you can identify that alpha-alpha in the blue bar result in the best overall performance, and is mainly connected to the low yield needed for the agricultural part. Then we move on and we look at the biorefinery in itself. In this case, we tested the alternative process, and in this graph, I show you the results for one alternative process, which is the precipitation. In this case, the alternative process is a biological precipitation, which mostly requires a lower coagulation temperature, so a lower energy needed, but also it results in a lower protein coagulation efficiency. So as you can see, a lower energy results in a lower environmental impact at the biorefinery side, because less energy is needed for the biorefinery itself, but the coagulation efficiency affects the credit on the protein, which are lower compared to the traditional scenario. And this doesn't counterbalance the saving on the biorefinery side, so on the total, we can see that the environmental impact of the biorefinery itself is higher. Third point, we look at the product. And for the product, in this case, we assess 3 different types of utilization. So the first of all, it's we take this press pulp and we enseal it and we use it as a feed for ruminants. The second one, it's that this press pulp is used as a fiber insulation material for buildings. And as the third is used for as a feedstock for further biochemical production. As you can see, the main result that we can find from this graph is that the savings and the environmental performance are highly depending on the type of product we are making. If we are making and substituting an agricultural-based product, we can have, such as, for example, the case of silage, we can have a large saving on the agricultural-related impact categories, such as agricultural end occupation or eutrophication. While, contrary, when we are making a material, and in this case we are making a fiber which replaces glass fiber, we can see that large savings are achieved in the energy-related impact categories, such as non-renewable energy and global warming. So some highlights from this study is that we identified that the cultivation carries most of the environmental impact, and while the savings highly depend on the cascade utilization of the platform product. And if we look at the biorefinery in itself, we can identify that the conversion efficiency plays a more important role rather than the energy savings within the biorefinery. In the second case, so now we move on, we are at the second case, and this time we will look at yellow biorefinery and on the lignin valorization. So now we cover the first part of the protein, and we move on and we look at the lignin. So why lignin? Lignin is one of the main biomass constituents, and it accounts for between 15 to 30% of the total dry matter. Currently, since we are still talking about a glucocentric approach on the technology, it's combusted as a low-value fuel or sent to the biogas, and but the amount of lignin available, it's much higher than the energy needs for the biorefinery. So there's an interest to exploit these components for the production of value-added product. There is only one problem. The lignin upgrade is quite problematic, and results the technology so far are not so efficient for two reasons. First of all is the recalcitrancy of the lignin itself. This is the structure of the lignin. So it requires a lot of energy and very harsh conditions to be depolymerized. Second point is the heterogeneity. So when depolymerized, this lignin, it can produce a several range of different aromatic compounds. So if we develop a technology that focuses on the upgrade only, for example, of the coumaryl, for example, we will always end up with a lower yield of the technology. So an emerging process that's been suggested is called biological funneling. In this case, we use organisms metabolically engineered which are capable of use the aromatics from lignin as a carbon source. The capability of these organisms is that they are capable of digesting different type of aromatic compounds, but they produce only one intermediate product. This is the reason it's called funneling. And from this intermediate product, throughout different upgrade process, different type of product can be made. This can be seen as a plug-in technology because it can take more or less any type of lignin post-fermentation residue, and it's thereby applicable to most of the yellow biorefineries. And the National Renewable Energy Lab in US, they've been working on a project, and they developed these bacteria that are capable of digesting all the aromatic compound to the intermediate, which is called muconic acid. And from this muconic acid, they decided to upgrade it to adipic acid, which is one of the precursors of nylon. They have been working on the lab on the pilot scale of this process, and from that they built up an Aspen simulation representing the industrial and upscale scenarios. So the objective of this research is first investigate the environmental performance of the adipic acid made from lignin compared to the conventional one, and the second is to identify the hotspot and criticalities within the conversion pathway. For that, we built up an LCA study, which functional unit is production of 1 kilogram of adipic acid with polymer grade. We decided to use a gate-to-gate approach because it's a plug-in technology, and also because results from this LCA can also be screened to the LCA of the main bioethanol production pathway. And thereby, the feedstock impact, So this lignin accounts for the missed energy that is not possible to produce because we are taking this lignin for material production. And the inventory are coming from the process simulation developed in Aspen Plus. And the impact assessment method in this case is Tracy 2.1 in order to better represent the US condition. These are the system boundaries of our LCA study. And as you can see, we have on the left side, here is the bioethanol biorefinery. And we take this lignin after the fermentation, and instead of burning it to produce electricity and heat, we depolymerize it first. We send it to the bioreactor where the muconate is produced, and after that the muconate is separated and then hydrogenated to adipic acid. So the first result is shown in this figure and is the assessment of the bio-based versus the conventional, the fossil-based adipic acid. And as you can see from the graph, the bio-based adipic acid has a lower impact across almost all impact categories, except for respiratory effect, and this is due to the production of sodium hydroxide, which is used in the conversion to depolymerize the lignin. Then we can look at the hotspot of this biorefinery, and on the left side, I break down the LCA score between the different input needed for the biorefinery in terms of material and energy, and on the right side, I divided it for the conversion stage. If you look at the input, there are two main inputs that contribute on the environmental impact, which is the sodium hydroxide, the blue group, and the heat and the heating duties, which is the red. If we look at the right side, we can identify that the depolymerization, which is the blue, is highly contributing on the environmental impacts, and this is due to the consumption of sodium hydroxide and the heat and cool. The second processes which is contributing is the bioreactor in itself, and this is due to the fact that we are producing an acid. Producing an acid through bacteria, if the bacteria do not tolerate change in pH, so whenever we produce an acid, we need to neutralize and buffer the solution so the bacteria can be productive. So there's a large consumption of sodium hydroxide, which is used as a buffer to neutralize the muconic acid. And the third point is the hydrogenation, and this is mainly connected to the heat needs for the processing itself, because there's a lot of changes in temperature for crystallization. So the highlights from this case, it's that the adipic acid production from lignin can have a lower environmental footprint, mainly for two reasons. First of all, because we utilize a side product from a biorefinery, and second, because we avoid the N2 emission, which is coming from the conventional production pathway. If you look at the hotspot, we identify three main processes that contribute on the overall performance, and the first of all is the depolymerization. As I said before, depolymerizing the lignin is kind of hard. So a suggestion to the technology developer is to look at alternative catalytic processes, or to identify if there are trade-offs in this process, so to reduce the condition of the depolymerization. The second one is the biological cultivation, and we identify that in the biological, the main carrier is the need for a buffer. So in this case, we suggested, as in line also with the research carried, for example, on succinic acid or in lactic acid, the develop of strained pH tolerant bacteria. So they are capable of working on low pH, so we can produce an acid without affecting the productivity of the bacteria itself. And the third point is on the upgrade on the catalytic process, and in this case, in the design, they are using noble catalysts, they are using rhodium on active carbon, and the interest there is maybe looking at more air-abundant metal instead of using a noble catalyst. And the third case, in this case, as I told you before, we are looking at alternative utilization of the cellulose. In this case, we are using the cellulose for the production of fibers for structural application, mainly on composites. So why making fibers? There's an attempt by the composite industry to reduce the environmental impact. The use of composite is very interesting because they are lightweight, so they can result on fuel saving, for example, if used in the car, but they have they are quite problematic on the production and on the disposal stage. So the composite industry tried to use the natural fiber in order to reduce the impact on these two stages of the life cycle. What are the reasons for that? First of all, the natural fiber are a bio-based source, so they are kind of renewable. They are also lightweight. They have a lower density compared to glass fiber, and also they are kind of easier to dispose. On the other side, contrary, they are not yet optimized for composite production because the production process for natural fiber is coming mainly from the textile industry, so they are not focusing on maximizing the mechanical properties. And this results on a major effect, which is the porosity in the composite. This is decreasing the mechanical properties of the resulting composite compared to glass fibers. Making a small review of the LCA study published on natural fiber, we can identify that there are contrasting results. Some show benefit on the use of natural fibers, some other doesn't. And I identify 4 main reasons. So the first reason is some study use a mass-to-mass comparison, and as probably you all know, is not a correct way to define a functional unit in LCA because it's not function-based. Other use a simplified mechanical model which doesn't account on porosity. Using this simplified mechanical model, you can see the main effect on the environmental impact on the left side. Here, Ledugue calculated the environmental impact increasing the fiber content in the composite, so how much bio-based material is in the composite. And the results from his study were showing that the more bio-based material you put in the composite, the lower the environmental impact. However, if you look at the mechanical properties, there's only one optimal fiber weight fraction. After that, the porosity have larger effect, and these result on a lower mechanical properties. So the mechanical properties of the composite, a high fiber weight fraction decrease. And these are not accounted here, logically. And the third point is also because the LCA case study, which has been published, focus on different type of applications. So probably also the application matters in this case. So the objective of this case is are 3. First of all is to, if it is possible, to better incorporate the micromechanical properties in LCA of composite materials. The second is to investigate what is the relationship between mechanical properties and environmental impact. And the third is to look at the effect also of the application on the environmental impact. To do so, we developed a 3-step approach, which is combined first a micromechanical model, which has been developed also for composite and taking account also the porosity. And from the micromechanical model, given the input of the fiber mechanical properties and the matrix mechanical properties, we can estimate the mechanical properties of the resulting composite. Those are used for the HP methodology, which allows us to calculate the comparable mass to fulfill the same design requirement for structural application, and this comparable mass is used as input for our LCA software, which is carried out in the LCA software. So first of all, we look at the effect of the different application. In the graph here, you can see the difference between the use of flex fiber and glass fiber in different structural application. And in blue, you can see that it's for rod application. In red is beam application, and in gray it's panel application. As you can see, the environmental impact, so the difference compared to the conventional, are depending on the application. So we can see an effect on that. And second point, we can identify that the best application for composite material is for panel application, like this. Second point that we investigated is also the effect of the macromechanical properties, so how much bio-based fiber is in the composite. In this graph, we can see that we calculated the environmental impact for composite with different fiber weight fraction on it. In this case, we can see that most of the environmental impact categories, 9 on 13, follows up an inverted bell curve with a minimum. And this is also in line with the mechanical properties, because the minimum is also where we have the highest mechanical properties available. So we can identify that the method suggested can be used in LCA of composite materials. And we can also identify that the best application for natural fiber composite is on panel application, because in this case we have a lower dependence of the HP index on the elastic modulus. And the third point is that the highest impact reduction, the impact savings compared to the conventional composite, is when the fiber fraction is optimal for mechanical properties, not when the bio-based content is maximized. Okay, so after these three in-depth case studies, we can take a look over and try to draw some conclusion. So the take-home messages, in this case, as you remember, the first research question is what is the value of an LCA carried at an early stage? And we can identify three main points from that. It can support technology development. As you can see, like in case one, we could assess and suggest different processing configuration to the technology developers. And in case two, we can also identify which are the hotspots on the current design. The second is also we can bring sustainability assessment at the design level. So using a process simulation and LCA, we can also bring environmental consideration at the same level as the technical and economical. And the third, which is a smaller one, it's regarding the biorefinery principle, because in case 1 and 2, we could assess the fact that it's very important to utilize all the biomass components. And in case 1, we also look at the pyramid of product utilization, which means that it can bring savings not only on the economical side, but also on the environmental side, the production of higher value product rather than low value, such as energy. The second research question that my PhD had is how we can determine an optimal configuration from a technical and environmental perspective. And as I show in case 1, the combination of process simulation and LCA allows us to understand the effect of the different components of the biorefinery, such as the feedstock, the product, and the process. So thereby, a parameterized modular approach combining process simulation and LCA to model the biorefinery can identify at different levels, from the process to the biorefinery to the system level, the environmental and the technical performance. The third research question was looking at what is the best LCA approach to incorporate the bio-based material properties. And as I show you in case 3, LCA results show that there is a non-linearity between the material properties, the environmental performance, and the bio-based content of the material. So it's important, in this case, to move away from a mass-to-mass comparison and include at least an application type when defining LCA of composite. And also, furthermore, it will be relevant to include also the micromechanical properties. So what's next? After these 3 years of a PhD, I identified 3 main research directions that will be interested to look at. First of all is the development of integrated model for biorefinery decision support. Right now, and during my PhD, I developed models for the techno-environmental assessment. So it will be interesting to also add economical assessment on that and also look at the market potential. I can give you an example of that. For example, right now, the idea that the Department of Energy in US is having about biorefineries, having huge plants in Midwest. And those huge plants will treat several tons of biomass. And so if the technology developers come up with a lignin upgrade technology that develop a really niche chemicals, this will saturate the market, so it won't be beneficial. So including the market assessment on the techno-economical environmental assessment will be beneficial, both to identify which is the most important chemical to focus on, and also for the environmental assessment to understand which type of product we are substituting. The second point that I thought about is about developing harmonized inventory for biorefinery technologies. because I can see this topic very similar to what has been done in the waste LCA. So at the beginning, so my point is we look and we developed inventories and LCA studies on specific technologies. And then I assume that after me, another new PhD will come and he will look at combining the technology that I developed to look at full upgrade and full integration of different technology. So it's very important that new inventory has been published to better assess this integrated system. And yeah, because more data are needed yet. And the third point that I identified is regarding the framework of natural fiber composite. Right now, the framework is including only mechanical application. However, for natural fiber composites, there's a large market also in thermal and insulation materials, especially for buildings. So it will be very relevant to include also this HP index in the model, so we can also assess the effect of the substitution in different type of application. Second point to investigate will be also to include the dynamic versus static application, because one of the largest market after building for natural fiber composite is car application. So it will be relevant to investigate also that, taking in mind that natural fibers has also a lower density, so they could be even more lightweight than conventional glass fiber composite. And a third point is to include more natural fibers in the framework. Right now we have only two types of fiber finished, which is flax and hemp. And it would be interesting to look at least some more exotic fibers, such as kenaf or jute, and also to develop better agricultural model, because right now the agricultural model for this type of crop are quite limited. For example, they don't include land use changes, and they're pretty old because they were developed around 2008, 2010. So this concludes my presentation. And small point, this is the first biorefinery I've been working on. This is in my hometown, and I was working as a chef, but in this case we were refining protein from cows to produce a delicious food, cheese. So thank you. Fast.
Thank you very much, Andrea.
Eh?
We're exactly on time. That's good. We will now have a 10-minute break, so please be here at exactly 2 o'clock. Then the questioning session will go on.